We want to continue to look at the graphs of sine and cosine today. We want to look at a few more things. Now, we've kind of done some of this already with our parent functions if we think back. So I'm going to skip over some of the slides here. If we remember x squared, if we graph x squared, something like that, and if we said what is x minus 2 squared, we remember that takes our graph and moves it to the right 2. Now, if it was 3x minus 2, that would move it to the right. I'd have to kind of set that equal to 0. Or if I factored out the 3, this would move it to the right 2/3. So we've talked about that moving graphs to the left and the right. And that's what we want to look at in this last section today. Moving graphs left and right. And also, if I added +1 here, how that would take my graph and move it up. So yesterday we looked at changing sine and cosine, the amplitude and the period. Today we're going to look at rigid stuff. Well, once we have our period and amplitude, now we're just going to shift it around in our graph. Now, one thing we have to do to get these right is we have to factor out the number in front of the x. So if I have sine, I have to factor out the 2, or in this case, factor out the 3, and I'll finish it in a second here. And in turn, what would I have left? Well, if I factor out a 2, this would be 3/2. Here, if I factor out a 3, this is pi over 6. Now, one way to help you see that is if I multiply this back, I get 3. If I multiply this back, I get pi over 2. So that's just kind of some background stuff to get us ready. So let's look at our formulas here. I think this is where the notes start. Yeah. So we have our formula now. Our A is our amplitude. We've already done that. Our B is our period. We've already done that. Now we're adding this x minus c, which is going to shift it left or right. If it is x minus c, we shift it to the right. If it's x plus c, we're going to shift it to the left, just like with our parent functions. So let's look at sine of x minus pi over 3. Now, there's no period change. There's nothing in front of the x. There's no amplitude change. There's nothing in front of the sine. Now, to do these, what we're going to do is we're going to graph them with our period and amplitude. Or just put, I shouldn't say graph, we're going to put the dots, our 5 key points. So for sine, starts at 0, ends at 2 pi, in the middle it's at pi, in the middle it's at 1, in the middle here it's at -1. So those are my 5 key points. But now I'm going to shift, because of the minus pi over 3, I am going to shift to the right pi over 3. Now if we remember, pi over 3 is 2 lines. It's about 1, 3 over 3. So I'm going to take each dot and I'm going to shift it to the right 2 lines, or 1. So now my graph looks like that. Okay. So now we're taking our graph and we're shifting our graph. Here's normal sine, and I shift it left, or right, excuse me, right, pi over 3. So we have to do what we did yesterday and get the graphs right before we decide to shift them. Let's try another one. 3 cosine of 2x minus pi over 6. So first thing I need to do is I need to factor out the 2 so I can see what my shift is. So my amplitude is 3. My period is 2 pi over 2, which is pi. And my shift is pi over 6 to the right, which pi over 6 is 1 line. So I'm going to graph the amplitude and the period. Those change the shape. So cosine starts at 1, so it starts at 3, ends at pi, negative, it's at negative 3, in the middle it's here, and here. Now, if I was doing this, I can slide things around the smartboard, so that doesn't really help you. Let's show how we can do this by hand. So I have those dots. Now I'm going to shift them all to the right, 1 line. So my red dots are my actual graph. It is okay to leave the blue dots on your graph. You know, that was awful. Let's try it again. In light pencil, to leave those blue dots, I'm looking for that connected, the red dots in this graph is our graph. Now, the last thing we want to add is this plus d to the end, or we could do it in the front, as I do here. So what this plus d does is now that we've added this one thing, it now moves it up or down d. So now we can change our amplitude, our period, we can shift it left or right, or we can shift it up or down. So let's look at all 3 here. I'm going to get rid of this plus sign here, just make it 2. That'll work better. So, my amplitude is 2. Now I need to factor out the pi. So my period is 2 pi over pi, which is 2. And my shift is right 1, which is 2 lines, and up 1, which is 2 lines. So let's first do our amplitude and period for cosine. Starts at 2, ends at 2, each about a half. 1, 1.5, 2 is there. In the middle, I'm at negative 2. In the middle, I'm there. So there are my dots for my amplitude and my period. Now let's do the shift. Each point is going to go right 1 and up 1. So I'm going to go right 1, or 2 lines, and up 1, which is right there. Right 1, up 1. Right 1, up 1. Right 1, up 1. Right 1, up 1. And there's my graph. So there's our graph with our amplitude, our period, and our shifts up and over. You're ready to do the homework for Trig Graphs 2.